welcome to this celebration of editing. If everyone would mute themselves, and obviously not the guests, but everyone else. If you have any questions, please enter them in the chat, and we'll get to them if we have time later. And if BFE members, just remember to vote, because that's what this is all about. And you can vote on the members page of the BFE website. We're very happy to announce the award for Best Editing Documentary 2020 is sponsored by Roundtable Post in London. And we'd like to thank Ben and Jack at Roundtable Post for that. I will briefly introduce all of the nominees. So if you'd kindly give us a wave. Zoe Schack has a background in commercials and documentaries. She teamed up with Jeff Buchanan to edit the Beastie Boys stories, which has already won an Emmy nomination. What's quite amazing about Zoe is that she was promoted to editor in 2019, and she gets an Emmy nomination in 2020. So well done.
Brilliant.
Thank you. Hi. Yeah, it was pretty wild.
Davis Coombe is a writer, director, producer, and multi-award winning editor. And he's here representing The Social Dilemma. There he is. Charlotte Landelius and Hanna Lejonqvist are both multi-award winning filmmakers and editors who've worked with each other before and are here representing I Am Greta. Hello.
Hi.
There they are. And finally, Martin Ellsbury is a multi-award winning editor who is having a long, distinguished editing career and is here representing his film David Attenborough, A Life on Our Planet. Welcome, Martin.
Thank you.
So we're privileged to have you all here, and congratulations to every one of you. I'd like, first of all, for you to introduce your films in terms of your perspective as an editor. So if you don't mind, Martin, I'd like to start with you.
Okay, my perspective as an editor in relation to the project, the particular film. Yeah, okay. So I have, as Andy said, I've got a long history in editing. I'm quite old now, and I'm sort of just beginning to move into semi-retirement. But I've worked a lot. I've worked mainly in natural history, the field of natural history, which you probably know traditionally came out of the BBC in Bristol. That was really the sort of world centre for natural history film production. It's all over the place now, but and I just happened to get my first assistant editing job in Bristol, and so was channeled into working on natural history projects. And I've actually worked on a lot of David Attenborough series over the years. In fact, the first one, David Attenborough's Life on Earth, which was his first major landmark series really, was being shot while I was still at school. And when I started at the BBC in Bristol, I remember working for half a day rewinding rolls of film for an editor who was working on Life on Earth. So that's my claim to fame with David. But I've worked on several of his big series over the years. So when I knew that this film was coming up, I was really keen to get my hands on it, and lucky enough to do so, because it meant a lot to me as I was sort of, reaching the end of my career really. Well, not the end, but I'm slowing down a little bit. That's all. So yeah, it was an important one for me to work on, and I'm really proud to have been able to work on it.
Great, thank you. Could we come to you, Zoe, next, please?
Yeah, so I guess I've always loved the Beastie Boys, and I've always been a big music person. So it was really exciting when Jeff Buchanan, who is Spike's longtime editor, he used to work with Spike and Erickson Brennan a bunch. Jeff asked me to help him out. And so it was a pretty long process for us in terms of working with the Beastie Boys, because we actually started on the initial book tour. So when Beastie Boys book came out, they asked Jeff to like put together these different photo montages and video montages for that initial book show. And that was a much more like, there were a lot more skits and fun things going on. And so he brought me on at that stage to kind of sort of go through all that stuff and help him put together those montages. And so we were on the first book tour and involved with all the rehearsals. And then they really loved it. They filmed, and Spike was involved with that too. He was like giving advice and stuff like that and coming into some rehearsals and giving notes. And then they filmed the last show of that in London, and they didn't shoot it as they would properly. So they were actually quite happy that they were like, okay, we should actually shoot this in a better way. So about a year later, that's when they shot, I guess it was October the previous year, and then April of the following year, we shot we actually shot the version that would become the film version. And so we were also involved with doing all the background videos, photo montages. Jeff was really involved with the rewriting of the performance with Spike, Amanda, and Mike and Adam. And so it was just a really exciting time. We had like tons of footage to work with and photos, and it was really a dream come true to work with such amazingly talented people who had like such a real, they're such great friends, and they are really honest about their mistakes and all their shortcomings of the past. And so that was a really exciting project to work on, and they're all really nice people also. So it was just really, it was just a complete dream come true to work on it. And but it was crazy too, because during the performance we were up to like 4 a.m, and the show was constantly changing, and we were constantly changing out photos and videos like up to the minute before the performance was going on. So it was pretty wild.
Thanks for that. Davis, if we could come to you next.
Yeah, hi. First, I just want to say I'm such a fan of the other 3 films as well, and I would have loved to have worked on that Beastie Boys film. It's like the soundtrack to my youth. Anyway, I guess so. I knew Jeff Orlowski, the director of Social Dilemma, pretty well. He's a good friend of mine because his first film I came on in the middle of that process, which was Chasing Ice, and then I was involved with Chasing Coral, which he made after that, before they started shooting really. And the same was true of this. So when he, we were trying to figure out what we were going to chase next, and when he started talking about social media, I had trouble thinking of what we were going to be chasing, but really it all started before we even shot any of our major interviews, and just kind of getting together with Jeff and the other writer and the producer, Larissa, and trying to figure out exactly what the film was going to be about, because there were so many problems that had come out of social media. And it was hard to sort of figure out the right way to even define the problem. So it took a long time for us to do that, and it was kind of a long exploratory process of interviews and until we came up with the structure.
Okay, thanks for that, Davis.
Yeah.
Hanna and Charlotte.
You want to start? It doesn't matter.
I cannot tell you as an editor, but I can tell you as a person. I remember when I saw the speech that Greta had in the UN a long time ago, before I was involved with the film, and I didn't like her. I was like, it was complexity about her being a child and her speech. She was like a dragon and a child at the same time. And when I was asked about this film to join the editing team, it was like a really responsibility and also a urge to know, how did this story become, how did this become, that UN speech become like that? Kind of initiative to join, or the breakdown in the speech. How does this happen? What happened before? So that was my sorry, I'm Swedish, but that was my in point, or whatever you say, to this process.
And I guess I was also curious about, her autism and her superpowers, and to make her, because everyone was like talking about that, but she's so weird. It's like she's not reachable, and it must be some way you can reach her, you know. So yeah, I guess both me and Hanna, we were super interested in her as a person, and to really get under the to get in there and try to understand her, and how her world functions and her ease.
Great, thank you very much. We'll get back to some of the things you've raised later on. Thanks for that. Okay, I'd just like to ask individual questions of the 4 projects, and we'll start with Martin. The film is such a finely balanced project, in that, you know, it presents David Attenborough as someone we know and doing what he does brilliantly, and that is explain the natural world to us.
Mm-hmm.
And on the other hand, he's the subject. So could you talk a bit about how you manage to weave that as an editor who's familiar with certainly the way he presents his material, but this new more urgent statement, this witness that he's making?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, it was a multifaceted film, really. David has quite a substantial fan base. You know, people have been watching his documentaries for a long time, and they love what he does, and they trust him. And that was the key, really, to being able to get another message coming through in his words. Now, he has hinted in many documentaries, particularly in recent years, that the planet is facing trouble, but he's never really sort of gone into any detail. So this film had to hook his fan base. So the history of David Attenborough was really important for that. It had to show beautiful wildlife images, because that's what people love watching. And once you've got your viewers hooked on those 2 ideas, then you can start to feed through the third, darker theme, which is we've got problems. And I think what was fascinating for me was being able to use David's new message and hang it on the stuff that was more familiar, really. And I think that's what people really sat up and took notice of. So yeah, it was a challenge because of those 3 different facets. Now, of course, David was narrating directly to camera, and that gave us our initial structure. And but that changed a lot, of course, you know, because as the film evolved, we wanted to shift the emphasis here and there. So we actually did a reshoot with David to pick up on a few more ideas. But largely those words that he was delivering straight to camera, that they were largely what the film was working with. And what made it I think what made it very effective was the fact that within the film there are 3 different David Attenborough modes. One is his straight to camera delivery that you might be used to from his documentaries, and the next one is a slightly more conversational tone, which I think really engaged the viewers. He was being very friendly with the viewers. That was number 2, and that was quite important. But what was really powerful were the moments where he went into sort of introspection and reflection. And he was off script there, basically. They were moments where he was talking to the director between his scripted takes. We quickly found out that they were very, very powerful to use. And so we used them as much as we possibly could. We even naively thought that we might be able to pick up a few more of those on a reshoot. But of course, you never can. I mean, they were just so natural when he was delivering them for real. But so that, that 3-pronged approach from the way David was presenting to camera, I think was really important.
Well, yeah, not just important, but for David Attenborough followers, it's unique. It's not been seen before.
No, absolutely. No. I mean, I think some of his fan base were beginning to pick up on the idea that he was hinting to them that there was something else to, sit up and take notice of in his other documentaries and series. But as I said, he never really pushed that home hard. He was just sort of softening people up for it, really. So, yeah, I think people were really quite affected by what he was saying, because, they do treat him as a source of authority. And for him to start delivering this new unheard message in terms of what he's done traditionally, I think was really important.
Well, it was beautifully executed as well. So thank you for that. Zoe, if I could come to you next. I just want to know more about the method, really, of your amazing film, and how you work together with Jeff. Is it right? Was this your first editing credit?
This is my first, film. I mean, I've done shorts before, but this was my first feature.
And commercials as well.
Yes, commercials.
Yeah. But yeah, so talk us through the way in which you worked with Jeff, and how you divided up the work, and just elaborate a little bit more on what you explained at the beginning.
So the structure was really there for the film because it was a live show. So it was interesting because it was sort of a new thing that Spike put together. It was a live show, but it turned into a documentary. So it was a live documentary. So that was really an interesting thing. So in the initial stage, Jeff and I split it up. Jeff took the first act until the end of License to Ill, and then I took the second half, and we just edited all the best parts of the show. So there are 4 different shows, 6 cameras. So we basically, like each different bite, we just took the best thing, and we just kept everything in there from the best parts from all the different shows. It was pretty interesting from a staging point of view because the show was changing every night. They were rewriting different parts, cutting it down. I think the first show was like 3.5 hours, and then like by the last show it was 3 hours. So there was a lot of like moving parts, different staging. So part of it was continuity, part of it was just finding the funniest or best moments. Spike and Jeff always like would remind me in the editing room, like the most important thing with Spike is just emotion, emotion, emotion. Like anything that you can feel any way, then that's like the thing you really want to get at. Like if it's sad, make it, really, not to embellish, like have it just be the real moment that they were experiencing. Try to like really show the honest representation of how they were feeling in that moment. So, so that was really what we were trying to do in the edit room. And then Spike was working with Jeff in New York, and I guess they were talking about just doing like, Jeff was saying that, oh, we're just like editing this kind of straight as a show. And then Spike was like, you know, let's add more archival, let's add more like photos. And there's so much footage of them throughout their whole careers. I mean, that's one of the blessings of working on something that's just been completely documented from when they were teenagers. So we just really had this amazing treasure trove of archival footage. We got in touch with MTV. Our awesome producer, Jason Baum, was just amazingly integral in helping us get all these photos cleared. And we were just like constantly finding new stuff on YouTube and figuring out how to get them cleared. And just like, we also had like from MTV, we were getting these like long interviews from the 90s. And we would get every single angle. We would get the edited version and the unedited version. So we were just like watching through them to find the best moments. And another really big part of it was to make sure that Yauk had a big presence in the film. So as we were watching, like we would find these amazing moments where Adam Yauk would be saying, like, describing like what it was like to be in the Grass-Up house, or what it was like to be, you know, working on Paul's boutique. And so we were able to like integrate him like he was in conversation with Adam and Mike. So that was really, as we were watching, a lot of these things were developing more and more. And yeah, it was just like you have so much footage and material to work with that it's, you know, hard to put in everything. But it was, I was really focusing a lot on the archival stuff, and I was watching a lot of that stuff after we put the initial like cuts together. And then Jeff really worked with Spike to cut it down quite a bit to make it the length that it is now.
So you were doing the photo montages, were you?
I was doing a lot of the photo montages, a lot of the archival footage. And yeah, I was pretty much like the archivist librarian sort of.
I just find it such a bold thing to have attempted, because if it wasn't done absolutely brilliantly with the authority that you gave it, it just wouldn't have worked. You know, two guys on a stage is not a very cinematic thing to do, and there are lots of reasons why it should fail, but it doesn't, and it succeeds magnificently. But just because it's such an audacious project, and it's just fantastic to me that I suppose my fear is that lots of commissioners without any imagination will try and duplicate what you've achieved, and they'll do it very badly. But I'm amazed by the authority that you stamped all over it, and you gave people a theatrical experience. That people who've been locked up for a year, you felt like you were in a theater.
I think that was partly just because, like, just speaking to the audaciousness of it was, I mean, Adam and Mike are performers. They've been performing since they were teenagers, and they're really hilarious. And like their chemistry is amazing on and off the stage, and they're just who they are. And then Spike has such a long friendship with them as well. I mean, they're genuine friends, and so they really all know each other so well. And that was really part of what we were trying to like have come across the camera. Like Spike had a microphone during the rehearsals, and someone was like, you should just have this during the thing, and that way when they go off script they can bring it back somehow. And so I really think you know, we were trying to leave in a lot of those mistakes and things and teleprompter accidents, because it was such a part of the live experience, and it was part of the joke, you know, like. So it was, yeah, it was really wild. And I think it was also like the genius of like Spike, Adam, and Mike that all kind of came together. And then we also had really great a great DP and camera crew. We had like every show there were different, they changed the camera slightly. So we really had a lot of angles to work with. And I think one of the last nights we had a Steadicam operator who was just awesome and was following the guys on the stage. And it was, yeah, we had a lot of fun material.
Okay, thanks for that. Davis. If you could talk us through the multi-layered symphony that was your documentary. It was there's drama, there's graphics, there's a group of interviews that are incredible, to say the least, with the intimacy and depth that you get out of them. Any one of those layers are extraordinary enough, but you were orchestrating all of this from a very, very early stage, from what I understand. And do let me know if Darren Aronofsky influenced any of your transitions from his film Requiem for a Dream. But anyway, just generally talk us through the process, because it was quite an endeavor.
Yeah, it was really unlike any process that I've been part of before, and mostly because it changed so much as we were making it. When Jeff and I and the rest of the team started talking about the film, we knew that the core of the whole thing was going to be these ideas, and it was going to be a pretty wonky movie with a lot of technology and a lot of explanation and a lot of background explaining how these platforms work and how these technologies work. And it took us a while to figure out what the actual story would be. As I mentioned, his earlier films, we had these scientists to chase around after, who had these massive undertakings, these projects that they were trying to do. And we realized that the thread of those films was that we were documenting people who were trying to show the world something that was previously unseeable. And the idea that it's difficult to alert the public and to get the world to understand how serious climate change is, because you don't really see it happening. And so that had been his goal from the beginning of his career, was to find ways to make those issues visible. And so when we came to this film, we kind of realized early on that there was going to be an additional element besides the interviews, since we did spend some time chasing Tristan Harris around hotel rooms and television appearances and getting in and out of Ubers. And, that was just not compelling enough. So we started thinking about how, breaking the film up with narrative content in some way. And initially we were going to do funny stuff. We were going to sort of poke fun at these issues. And we had ideas of bringing in a bunch of comedic actors and doing sort of disparate standalone sketches, really. But as the documentary portion of the film took shape, we realized how serious it was, and it really became apparent to us that it wasn't, it just wouldn't be appropriate to turn it into a comedy or to even try. And so we started thinking about a narrative that could unwind along with the film, which the documentary part of the film, which I sort of saw as a kind of an essay. And so it took a long time for us to come up with that, and it wasn't until the documentary, the interview-driven portion of the film was starting to come together that we started to throw script ideas out, and it really was just the last few months where we wrote the script. Jeff and the screenwriter Vicky Curtis wrote the first draft of that just a few months before we submitted it to festivals. And we'd actually had the whole film edited with the scenes from the narrative story intercut in like storyboard form, with my assistant editors doing the dialogue and like animatic drawings from our storyboard artist. So like we really had no idea if it was going to work or not. It was just this sort of mad dash to the finish line. We were cutting the narrative scenes while they were shooting them in like the month before we finished the movie, before we sent it off to the sound mix and the color. So it was tough to get it to all come together at the end. And of course, you know, I think I learned a lot about narrative editing in this process. And I think for a long time, I thought, oh, it must be so easy. They have a script and there's, you know, all the actors are doing exactly what they're supposed to do. And it's just a whole bunch of different problems that you don't normally have as a documentary filmmaker. And so switching gears between the two was interesting. And it was, you know, it was fun in that sense, but it was also and especially challenging because if I didn't like the way somebody was explaining something, I could go back to our 2-day-long interview with 7 cameras and make them say it exactly how I wanted. I couldn't do that with the actors, you know, I couldn't do that with the narrative content. So we had to figure out a way how to break that story up and get it to fit in the structure of the documentary. And it was tricky. And yes, there's definitely a Requiem for a Dream reference in there. I was pretty resistant to that at the beginning, but you know, the first version of it, we were even jumping with the score from that film. So
whose idea was that out of interest?
You know, I can't remember. It's the section of the film where we're talking about the addictive properties of social media platforms. And yeah, I think my assistant editor, Dave Ruck, actually cut the first version of that sequence, which is just a bit of a shocker when you see it in the movie, because it's, you know, the pacing of the cuts and the sound design is pretty intense right there. And I remember when we were in the mix, the first time we were sort of stepping our way through the film, and it was the first time I'd seen it with all of the sound design that they'd added at Skywalker. And when we got to that scene with the rapid cuts with the needles and the eyeballs and I mean, it just sort of blew me out of my seat. We kind of had to tone it back a little bit because it was a little too extreme.
Okay. Did you want to just go mention the graphic element as well?
Yeah, I mean, that was another thing that was trickling in at the last minute, and and it was a huge part of the film. We had a lot of sort of motion graphics throughout the documentary portion that we were sort of using to help explain things, and then in the narrative film, we had there was sort of 2 different worlds. There was this sort of realistic world where this family lived, but for that we had to create a sort of a new social media platform that didn't exist because we couldn't just use Facebook. So the graphic house that we used, the motion graphics house, which is called Mass Effects, which is here in Denver, you know, they had to come up with the way this platform looked, the way it behaved, all of the notifications, all of the individual posts that these characters were sharing. All that stuff was created, you know, with pictures of their families and stuff. And along with that, we had this other world where the algorithms, we showed this sort of imagination of what these algorithms looked like. And that was kind of the element of trying to show something that's unseeable, that Jeff came up with after discussing how these algorithms work with Tristan and Asa, who was one of the other subjects of the film. We sort of realized that, and that started out early as you know, it was going to be a sympathetic character who's stuck in a cubicle, and his job as an algorithm was to keep his user engaged, and he was working his way up the corporate ladder. But again, that even became too light and too lighthearted and too sympathetic, and so we decided that the algorithms were sort of it's three parts of the same system, and so we decided to have one actor play them all, and I think he did a pretty amazing job capturing the sort of essence of those different personalities. And I mean, it was hard enough to have to cut all this narrative stuff, which was a little bit out of my wheelhouse. But then some of the narrative stuff was motion control, multi-camera motion control stuff, where the actor was playing three different characters in the same shot, and we had to figure out how to sort of quickly composite all that together to see if it was working. And there was another motion graphic house that was finishing those shots before the original motion graphics house put it all together and created the computer interfaces, and it was considerably more complicated than most of the films that I've worked on, to say the least.
Okay, thanks for that.
Yeah.
Hanna and Charlotte.
Yes.
Yes.
Well, hello. Talk to us about your film and the two kind of elements of it, which are beautifully woven together. The campaigning side of it, and what you achieve with getting into Greta's head, because that is a very deep and meaningful experience for the viewer, I think, and it's possibly a surprising one. So how did you manage to weave those two elements into your project?
I think that was our biggest challenge in the work with this film. The main character, or Greta, is autistic, and she doesn't really
gives body to her explanations. And
she doesn't show so much. And I think in the beginning there wasn't even supposed to be a voiceover from her. But then that took a lot of work to get close to her, because we could have made the film about only the environment, or her campaigning, or her year of campaigning. But that wasn't that didn't really.
I mean, we've seen that before, and we knew, everyone knew that.
The hero's journey, So we needed to find something else, and that was pretty late in the process. We tried it over and over again to use. We didn't want to do, or the director didn't either want to do this voiceover film. But then in the end, her small kind of gestures didn't really come through for a film that would have moving forward all the time. If you would stay in one scene for a very, very, very long time, you would see the nuances. But so our main challenge was her getting close to her, and then combining it with this. But it's kind of a basics. It is the hero's journey story, right?
But since she's autistic, and it's not so, it was also it was also tricky to know which part, how long the video should be in every part, and because it couldn't be too long, and to short it down, and so
and to put pictures on her words was kind of like sometimes not. It was just a trial and error, so it took a long time editing. It wasn't an idea from the beginning. These pictures are meant to be for her. It wasn't like that. It was it was a collaboration between us two and the
digging in the
material, in the footage.
Try to find.
But it goes beyond just observing her. You really get the sense that you're you're almost inhabiting her at various stages of the film. The rhythm of it is just incredible.
Thank you so much.
It just,
but when you live with a person like for, I don't know, almost 8 months at minimum, we lived with her, and COVID came, and we were kind of in this bunker together with us two, the director and Greta, on the footage. You kind of like, you adapt. It's her pace, I think. That comes.
Yeah, it comes naturally. So.
So the material was available to you right from the beginning of the story. It was premeditated in some ways.
But I mean,
when you started, Nathan, the director, was still offshore. Would you say that? Yeah, he was offshore filming.
But that was like the last thing that we actually filmed, like scene-wise. But then we, of course, we added footage like, we have to do some research and take in like news footage and to build archives and stuff like that. And also all the interviews for the VO was done afterwards, of course.
Yeah, and he had some. I mean, he had the director had read her diaries and also been there when she wrote them, so he knew that they were available. And then we didn't really know how to use them, so that was later on in the process when we kind of needed it. We knew we could read her words, like scripted down, and but then he started to record them, and then it was like I started editing, doing music videos with like not a written script or anything, just go with emotions. This was going back to that in a way, getting a lot of material and use it and try again and feel.
But most of our films, when we work on documentaries, I mean, there's no script or anything.
No.
We're digging out the gold. It's like, this is a good part. And then
and both are used to working with grand material, really big materials, like 800 hours sometimes, I did a film about Bergman, Ingmar Bergman. He's the most
I did another film about him.
I did another film about him. There's a lot of films about Bergman. I'm used to handling a lot of footage, and this was a lot of footage. It was 1 year filmed every hour.
Because they really didn't know what direction the movie should take from the beginning. So they filmed so much. So it was It is a first-time director also, and they didn't know what this story would end when they started. So he was there the first day she campaigned and didn't with only herself, and then the end is in UN. So during 1 year, no one knew this was gonna happen. And like. The story of Greta grew, the film also grew. So we grow with her, like it grew simultaneously, of course.
We didn't know when we started where it was gonna end. No one did.
How did you divide the work between the two of you?
Like
back and forth. We split the film at some point, and then we changed the parts, and then we edited, like, you do the voiceover, you do the emotional blah, and then back and forth, and then
one mix everything,
and then one was free for a week, and the other one and then came back and we did a show for the team or for us. And then gave comments, and then the other one was free for a week. So it was very like
it was a lot of back and forth.
Very good, thank you very much. Martin, I'd like to come back to you and talk about music, if I may.
You may, yes.
Good. So Stephen Price.
Yes. Yeah. Very, very talented guy. worked with him before, actually. In this particular instance, there wasn't quite as much to and fro between the edit and the composer, although there was, you know, obviously there is the normal to and fro. But yeah, I mean, I think he produced a very fine score. There's one little bit, actually, I was watching the film again the other evening. There's one little bit where I think he could have done something a little bit differently, but I'm not going to tell him that now. And yeah, he was a great guy to work with. Great guy.
Were you working with temp tracks to begin with, or
Yeah,
how did that?
Yeah, we were working with a few temp tracks, although, which I normally do. Although in this instance, because the sort of spoken journey was so strong, we tended not to do as much work with temp tracks as I would normally do, because the words and the images were bringing the emotions forward. I work with temp tracks where I want to try and amplify the emotive content of what you're seeing on screen or what you're hearing in the words. So not quite so much of this time, but it was a good journey. Yeah.
Right. Okay. So I'd like to come back to you and talk to you a bit about the transition you've made from assistant to editor. Talk us through that. And did that coincide with your move from New York to LA?
No. So I just moved to LA because I wanted to be in LA. Before when I was in New York, I was at an animatic house. So I was doing a lot of graphics, a lot of like After Effects and stuff like that. And I was an editor there. And then when I came to LA, I was assisting because I wanted to do commercials and music videos and film. So I joined up, started freelancing with Final Cut in LA. They have 3 offices in New York, LA, and London. And they just had a really great roster of editors. They have, you know, Jeff and Crispin and I mean, the owner, Rick Russell and Joe Guest. There's just like so many great editors there. I learned from all of them while I was assisting, and I, you know, was cutting a lot with them. They gave me lots of great opportunities. And I was doing more and more editing as an assistant, and you know, doing more cutting assistant work. And then Beastie Boys project, that's when I really got promoted, was because we were just doing so much together. And yeah, that was sort of like that. The movie kind of launched me as like a, you know, as a full-time editor instead of assisting. So it was a lot at once, which is pretty amazing, you know, to be nominated for all these awards, and but most of all, just to be working with Spike and Adam and Mike and have that opportunity. That was pretty crazy.
Are you planning to carry on cutting documentaries or?
Yeah, so since then I've worked on a few documentaries and a short documentary. So I have been doing documentary work since then. I worked on, you know, just a lot of different things. So it's been a mixed bag, which is really nice to kind of go from short form to long form. It's nice to divide it up and have like, it keeps your brain constantly thinking about different things and how to structure stories. And I definitely learn a lot from every project because they're always so different. And there's so many different elements that go into like the different formats. So that keeps me, you know, always learning and having fun with editing. And yeah, I've been working with really great directors too. So that's been a real godsend.
Well, it's been extraordinary, your progression through the ranks. It's wonderful. I think you'll be an inspiration to a lot of people who would like to like to become an editor in a reasonably short space of time, and then win an Emmy or get nominated for an Emmy?
I think it's, just also just a function of working with such great people. I mean, Final Cut's such a supportive environment, and everyone's really helpful and nurturing, and really they grow from within. So it's been a lot of it was a lot of luck, I think, and just being at the right place, the right time. So yeah, I definitely feel very grateful and fortunate, for sure.
I don't think that there's any luck in the Beastie Boys story.
It was a lot of hard work, but also so much fun. Also, I just have to shout out Amanda Adelson. She was doing a lot of writing and she was one of the producers on the project. And also Jonah Hill was on the project. So I just have to make sure they were a big part of the writing and very integral to all parts of the process.
Is there a Beastie Boys 2 on the cards?
Not that I've heard or know of, but yeah, I mean, there's so much to work with, so I wouldn't be surprised. And there were so many things that we cut. We did put out one thing that we had originally cut as like a standalone piece called The Ring. But that was also sort of part of like the end of the film. We did what Spike called the mixtape. And that was just some of the things that we had cut out from the show, and just doing a mashup of some of our favorite things that we couldn't really fit in to the time of the movie. So that was, yeah. But yeah, I would love to work on a part 2 if it's a possibility.
We've had a question from one of our viewers who'd like to know what edit system you use.
Oh, we used Avid.
Avid. And is that true with you, Martin?
Yes, yeah, I was using Avid. Mm-hmm.
And Davis?
We used Premiere.
And Hanna and Charlotte?
Avid.
Mm-hmm. I find, Davis, that from my limited experience with Premiere, that the thought of what you had to knit together on your project is just terrifying, technically on Adobe Premiere. But obviously you don't find it too problematic.
I think that when you work on really big projects with lots of media, you end up having problems no matter what you're working on. I started on Avid, and I cut on Avids for 8 years, and then when I started a small post house, we were all using Final Cut Pro, and that sort of went away, and we didn't know what to do after that. I went back to Avid for one film, and then tried Premiere, and I just preferred it. I just find it to be a lot more flexible and a lot faster. But it doesn't really matter which platform you use.
Very good. Very good. Hanna, sorry.
There are also, just keep in mind, there's quite a few questions from the people.
Okay. Do you want to do any? I just have one more question I'd like to ask Hanna and Charlotte, and then you can dive in. Hanna and Charlotte, I'd like to talk to you about Rebecca, and also how you use music and how you work with music. I thought the music was beautiful in the film, and it was used beautifully. So talk a bit about that.
Well, Rebecca came in pretty late in the process. I would say.
Very late.
Yeah.
Super late, I would say.
We had different composers and temp music in for a long time that didn't really express Greta, and also couldn't work with that small Asperger
distinction in the music.
And also the grand of all this almost being a messiah. that's pretty tough to make that that range. But then Jon, who was also doing the music with Rebecca, was attached to the project, and
you worked with him
I worked
before?
with him before, and he does like Hollywood movies sometimes, but that wasn't even enough. And then when Rebecca came in, she put on that, like, she made the range of the music, and she did that with her vocals also. She everything is vocals in the no, not everything, but much of it, it's vocals that has been changed. So it's or I don't know, but everything is also digital. It's analog and changed. And I mean, the studio they have is amazing, where they work with music. And yeah, she just they just got what the film they got it, and then it was. I mean, some scenes we edited and they just changed the music, or from the temp, and just, you know, when you think it's never going to be better, this time it was when you change it.
You were working with temp tracks from the beginning, were you?
Some temp tracks, some with the composers that we thought were going to be attached to the project. So yeah, it was different, and some of them were also temp tracks from Rebecca and Jon. Yeah, but we used like Philip Glass, you know, all of that. And who can compete with? Yeah. Oh no, you're using And the soundtrack from Arrival was a favorite, of course. And then they brought the music, and it was like, this is even better. How can it never done this? Never happened before. Yeah, so we're just pleased with their work. I love it.
Well, it worked. Okay, Roberta, any other questions from the viewers?
We have quite a few, actually.
Okay.
So first is Grace asking, any advice for aspiring editors? What do you all wish you knew entering the industry that you know now, that you wish you knew, basically? Anybody?
Who wants to answer that?
Go for it.
It can get worse. It's always time pressure. It's always a deadline. So go home in time sometimes.
I think, have to go.
Sorry.
No, you go ahead.
I was going to say, I don't think I knew what to expect when I went into editing, to be honest with you. I was very young, quite immature, very naive. And what I would say, I think, you know, what I've taken from my experience of working with film over the years is you need to get the best out of it, you need to be prepared to immerse yourself in the subject and let the subject become your life and your reality for a while. Now, I know it's only something that you're looking at through a screen, but if you really want to engage with it in a powerful way, let it become part of you, really. But there's a big but with that as well, because if you have superiors in the chain of command who want to try and make the film that you've grown to love into something that you don't want it to be, then, I mean, yeah, by all means try and persuade them that, you know, they can go a different route. But if they're not going to go a different route, be prepared to just let go of it at the end, really, because you will burn out very quickly. It will destroy you if you let it. So that was sort of what I was going to say, really.
Zoe, did you want to say something as well?
I think just piggybacking off what Martin was just saying, like, I think with notes, a lot of the time you know, for me, it's like, I always love to just try different things. And, you know, sometimes it's better, or sometimes it could be a little bit worse, but a lot of times it makes it better. And you think about things in a different way, and to never be afraid of just trying as many different things. If you have a like idea, no matter how crazy it is, it's like, oh, maybe that really works, you know? So I think just don't be afraid of changing things process wise, just constantly rethinking things, especially with documentaries, because there's so many different ways something can go, and it's an exploratory.
Yeah, and I think to a large extent it's down to your imagination and what you let your imagination do with the film. That's often what drives the shape of the film, in my experience, or should do anyway.
I also think it's like really like leading. I think I learned most like leading with emotions, you know, like if you feel anything, then that's probably the direction you should go in. Like let your emotional, like really, it's really helpful to be in touch with that and to let that be your guide. Because if you feel something, chances are someone else will feel something as well.
I'll merge a couple of questions for you, Zoe. One is from me, actually. How did it work with the clips that, you know, they have clips going on the actual screen of the theater? Are those something that you worked on, and were they the same that we do actually see in the, because we cut to that and we imagine that the theater is seeing the same, but are they?
Not always. A lot of the time, we would get this amazing footage. Like at the very end of the process, we got a bunch of like Super 8 and 16 millimeter footage from Mike and Adams. So that was just incredible. So there were a bunch of comps that we did. And, you know, that was one of my things because I was kind of the comping queen. And so I was doing a lot of like really fun comps of putting them, you know, behind in the screen. And then sometimes we would pop out from, you know, the footage into the screen or vice versa. So there were times when we did that for sure. Yeah.
But did you work on the actual clips on the screen, so before the show, or is that
both?
Both. Okay.
Yeah, it was a combination of both. A lot of time it was the actual footage, and then you know, sometimes it wasn't. Yeah.
You anyway, yeah.
So it was both.
And also, how many weeks did you have to get to a test version of the film?
How many weeks do we have a what?
To get to a test version of the film. This is Neven's question.
A custom version? What do you? Sorry.
A test version. Just for a test audience or something?
Oh, for an audience?
Neven, you can mute yourself if I'm saying something wrong.
Oh no, I'm just looking at the.
Of it.
Sorry. Test version of the film. Well, it was really in like different sections because like I think for one we just put the whole film together, you know, just like the best bits, and then I'm not really sure what the test version was, but we definitely had a bunch of screenings with we did like had different audiences come in, but that was a little bit later in the process. But a test version, do you mean like when like Spike would first start seeing it?
When did you get to a version you could screen for your group of people, for your director and producers?
I think it was pretty early that Spike came in. Like we really we did our initial cut, and then there was a bit of a break because they were working on another project, and then we came back and he came in pretty quickly. I think within a week or two after we had cut the initial. I could be wrong though.
But how many weeks was that of editing?
I think we worked on like the initial show was like 3 weeks, and that I think 2 to 3 weeks, and then when we came back, it was probably another week or so for the like before we showed Spike. But that was just a small group.
Oh, but you edited before the show, right? How many weeks editing?
Oh, for the show? For the show, Oh, I don't remember now because it was a few years ago. Sorry.
Just wondering how long you had to edit this thing.
Well, it was interesting because we had, you know, it was really in parts because we had the first initial tour. So we had all these photos and things, and that was probably about a month of work. And then I think we had about 6 to 8 weeks leading up to the show. And then, you know, post show, we started editing probably right away in April, right after the show. And that was about, I think, 2 to 3 weeks.
That's fast.
Yeah, that's
Well, just to get the, you know, just to get the basic show together. And then we got, and then we started doing, you know, cutting things down. I think that was more with Spike. And then we started with the archival. We didn't really mess with the archival stuff. And then we changed the opening a lot. You know, we had this B camera from Lance Bangs, that he did a lot of the behind the scenes with like the audience members. And so that came like a little bit later in the process. So we didn't even start with that in the initial cuts.
Thank you. That's answered my question very well. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I will go on to Davis. Kirsty's asking, did it change the way you use social media technology, or even just use your downtime working on this project, obviously?
You know, I wasn't a big social media user before, but it certainly made me more aware of what that relationship of using social media actually is. I think everyone on our production took the Facebook apps off of our phones, and you know, we had to sort of, you know, we had some pretty sensitive interviews, and so we didn't want to use Google Docs, and we didn't want to use any of these other services that are common, you know, because some people were telling us that, you know, Google could be sifting through our emails, and I mean, it was a little bit scary, and so there was that, and you know, one of the big questions the whole time was, how are we going to promote this film when we're done? Because it might seem a bit hypocritical to post about it on Instagram after we've spent, you know, an hour and a half dressing them down. So that was, yeah, it was tough. I still sort of, I'll admit that I sort of voyeuristically use it to keep up on what my friends are doing. But I've never really wanted to say anything to everyone I know at the same time. So it just never really appealed to me.
I love that at the end you kind of say that, not the end show, the end text.
Yeah, I remember Jeff came up with that idea at the very, very end of the mix, actually, and we sort of hobbled it together really quickly.
Yeah. Then what do we have? This is for everyone, did you always want to do documentary and work towards this, or did you just go wherever their careers took them? I know Martin already said it meant a lot to him to work on Attenborough docs from a young age. So maybe we start with you, Martin.
It did mean a lot to me, working on high-profile David Attenborough docs, but only in retrospect, to be honest with you. When I first went into editing, as I said before, I found myself being channeled into the world of wildlife film editing, because that's what happened where I was working. I didn't have any burning desire to do that. I don't consider myself that at that time of my life I had any real knowledge of the natural world. I wouldn't have called myself a naturalist. I wasn't a bird spotter or, you know, any of that. I just happened to land myself in a job where I was cutting those subjects. So I went with it, and, you know, very quickly I found myself sort of moulding myself into that role. And I don't really have any regrets about it at all. It's been great. But no, I mean, I didn't always want to do that. I knew I always wanted to do something with film or photography or the visual arts, but that's as far as it went, to be honest with you, with me. And I went with the flow after that.
What about the others?
I actually studied documentary filmmaking in school. After I initially went for sculpture, I decided that I really wanted to do filmmaking, specifically documentary, because I thought it would be a way to constantly learn about different things, and I wanted to do something that I felt was, had some sort of impact in some way. Like, I really come from a political family. Like, they love politics and environmentalists and all that stuff. So I think that was a big part of and I also watched a lot of documentaries in college and like when I was younger as well. So I always was drawn to that. And so again, I feel very lucky to be in a place where I can work on that. And I also, I did some bird watching. So I do like all that stuff. So, I think, a dream would actually be to work on like a lot of them kinds of films that you all have been working on, because they're something I'm very interested in.
I will merge again a couple of questions for Hanna and Charlotte. One was mine, you kind of half answered that about the film, like, because obviously you wonder how he was filming already at the very beginning of the project on her own. How did you know then? Like, let's transform the question. How did you know that? Why was he there filming this little girl outside the school without obviously knowing what was gonna happen?
Yeah, he didn't really know. There was a tip. There's going to be a small. He's in the environmental movement in Sweden, and there was a tip that this girl was going to sit there, and so he went down and filmed, and then only supposed to film the 3 weeks before the Swedish election, and he got a small fund from the Swedish funding in the Swedish Film Institute for making a short, but then it was really nice material, and also Greta grew from 0 to at least 80 in a month or two. So he just kept on.
Yeah, because she went viral so quickly. It was crazy.
But yeah, it makes you wonder how you were there. But this actually takes to the other question from, hang on, I missed it. Yeah, Fer, asking if the film got refinanced several times as the schedule kept getting longer, and obviously, as you just said, it was conceived as a.
They got the small funding, and then it was like a, what do you call it, dealing between international betting situation, because she went so big between the big TV channels, and Hulu and BBC One.
There you go. Thank you. Then Jeremy is asking, do you think documentaries have to be narrative focused to get noticed or be effective and affecting? How far are you willing to go to make the facts and material serve the narrative? For everyone, this one.
That's an interesting one from a wildlife film point of view, because often we're creating exciting sequences that are happening in the natural world which might not actually have been happening. There's a whole sort of ethical debate around this actually, which fascinates me. I use an example of a sequence shot in Africa of monkeys in the top of a tree being very wary that there is this eagle flying overhead, and this eagle, I can't remember the name, but it's a crowned eagle, and it will actually swoop down and pick up these monkeys and carry them away.
Martin, please don't shatter my dreams.
So this particular sequence, of course, was filmed by several different cameramen in probably several different locations, many probably not quite in the same part of Africa either, and it was the editing that created the tension within it. So you cut to a shot of the eagle flying overhead. You cut down, you see the monkey looking really agitated, maybe jumping from branch to branch. Now, the fact of the matter is that this eagle did take a monkey at the end of the sequence, and we saw it in one shot. But the dramatic build-up was created in the editing. Now, at that time, it was an acceptable thing to do. I think people would be much warier now of being that direct with the imagery, because I mean, like, they have the reaction that Andy had just then. You know, they don't want their illusions shattered. But the fact is, this is a form of filmmaking like any other filmmaking, really, and it just so happens to sort of be grouped in with the documentary genre. It's an interesting one. I don't know. There's a debate to be had there still.
You know, it's funny, Martin. The first real job that I had in this industry, the first professional job, the first job I got paid for, I was coming in at night to digitize the dailies for a nature film that was about, it was not quite David Attenborough caliber, but it was about the tall grass prairie. And I remember, and I was fresh out of film school, you know, and I remember bringing all these clips in that had to do with the sequence about a grass fire sweeping across the plains, and the DP had all these close-ups of a turtle running away from the burning grass. And the first shot that I saw, you know, it was on tape, and I'm like, you know, rewinding back and forth, and the turtle, and then the turtle runs away and like falls off of a table. And then the camera panned away, and I realized that she's shooting this in her garage, and it just horrified me. I couldn't believe it. And, you know, it just broke the innocence that I had growing up watching nature films all along. But I think it's okay to do that. You know, if you're serving a purpose, telling a story about a bigger story that's, you know, is true essentially.
Yeah, I think that's the key to it. It
yeah,
needs to have a central core of truth in it. If you contain that, then I think you're okay in doing these things. But you know, a lot of people still get very hot under the collar about these things.
Absolutely.
And there are codes of practice in place.
For sure. And when you're doing political films and films that are sort of could be viewed as activism, it becomes incredibly important to be very careful about the truth. And
yeah, exactly.
Things like The Social Dilemma get run through a series of fact checkers, and our associate producers are going and researching every single line of the film before it's finished to make sure that we can stand behind everything in the film being true.
Yeah.
I think one of the most interesting things that's happening in documentary right now is the way the genre is being blended with narrative. Our film did it one way, but I've seen it done so many other ways that are so interesting.
Yeah.
A film like Nomadland, I think it's interesting to think about where the genre will go in the future.
And if I can add, in terms of question, like within this question, how does it work with political issues at this point? Like, how far are you willing to go to take a job that you might not agree with? I think this similar question came out with the documentary series. So, you know, you might agree or disagree with even just a part of the documentary that you're working on. How do you deal with that? And do you accept jobs? How do you accept jobs that you might not completely agree with the political side that they're taking, or any side, not only political?
Well, I think that's one of the things that drew me to this kind of work originally. And certainly the more I did it, the more I appreciated that part of it, is that it's a way of aligning the work that you do with your sort of worldview and the change that you want to see in the world. I couldn't work on a film that was pushing a narrative that I didn't agree with or felt was harmful. But at the same time, in the environment that we have, especially in this country now, it's not helpful to make films political. That whole process has become so corrupted and so separate from the truth. But if you start to veer anywhere near politics, you're eliminating half your audience, and I think it's unless you're making a film about politics, it's usually I usually try to keep it as unpolitical as possible.
For you actually, David, I think the last question. Sebastian is asking, he was actually interested in hearing about the 1 week on and 1 week off schedule and how you managed to actually rest while still being at home, so almost the office, and in your case with the subject of the work too. David, that was you, I think. I think you.
No, I don't think so. I wish I was working 1 week on, 1 week off. Sounds nice.
I'm not sure who.
That was Hanna and Charlotte.
I didn't really understand the question, but
I think it's because, if you're still at home, it's difficult to actually have a break from the film.
If we can have a break, even if we're not working on it, don't you mean if we're still in?
Are you actually resting, or are you just thinking about the film the whole time? I think that's what you mean.
Probably thinking about the film, yeah. but not having the director and the producers knocking. It makes. I mean, I think much of the film's process of making a film is in the betweens for me. I mean, work like a maniac to do something, and you need that time to sit in front of the material. But then when you leave, in betweens is where you actually make the good decisions.
It was a privilege being two, so we could go like on terms.
Yeah.
But if you work on alone on one movie, everyone to take breaks. To like cut for like 1 or 2 months or 2 months and then have a little break and then come back, and because that's like the only way you can see the movie with a clear view.
Completely. Okay, I think that is it. If nobody else comes with a last minute question. Yeah, no, okay. I think. Okay, Jeremy is just asking, what are you working on next? So that's for everybody.
I'm going to be working on a series about wildlife in the British Isles, but the main edit is not until 2022. Where are we now? We're in 21 now, aren't we? Yeah, next year. But this year I'm doing a series of small pre-edit blocks to work up to the main edit. That's my project next.
Anyone else? You're on holiday?
Yes.
Nobody else working on anything else?
I recently worked on a documentary about Charlie XCX, and that'll be premiering at South by Southwest. I worked on it with 2 other editors. And then in January and December, I was working on a short about a WNBA point guard, and that's on YouTube. And then now I'm going to be working on a few commercials.
Nice. Hanna, Charlotte, Davis, anything going on?
After staring at all those interviews for so long, I wanted to work on an observational film. So we just finished another, not with Jeff, with some different directors, some first-time directors who were photojournalists, a film about a Yupik Native American village in Alaska that is threatened by erosion and melting permafrost and climate change, essentially, and they have to move their entire village somehow. And so we documented that story sort of from their point of view, and it's a really quiet, sort of small film. It was a nice break. But then now I'm starting on another film that's all about how, the end of the world is coming and we're all going to starve to death, and it'll be another stressful year for me.
Oh God. Well, good luck with that and with the end of the world, I guess. Maybe the world will end before you finish the edit. You never know.
It's a race against time.
You, Hannah, Charlotte, do you have something coming up?
I had a film that went to Sundance and competed. It's called The Most Beautiful Boy in the World. But since then I've stopped editing. I have a pause. I'm a commissioner for feature films in Sweden now.
Oh.
Yeah, a three-year break.
Nice.
And
No, it's not nice. I'm sorry. That's it's always sad to lose an editor from.
oh no, you don't lose. I just have a break
Okay, all
to
right,
breathe
okay.
a little bit
You
and
must come
move.
back.
To move a bit. Yeah, and I was on a pause. I also finished another documentary called Passion. And I'm on a pause studying fine arts for doing a master. And I'm also directing a documentary about a very famous poet in Sweden.
Okay, well, you went all different.
Yeah, it was a hard year.
We needed a break.
Literally, like it destroyed you.
So that's why we're so happy for this. It paid off.
All right, I think we can, everybody who wants to mute themselves and say hello, Andy, please take the lead again. I'm out. We can wrap it up.
Good. Well, and anyone who wants to go can, and anyone else who wants to stay, more than welcome to stay and ask the questions they really want to ask.
Yes, it's that moment where we really wrap
and we thank you all for.
Thank you so much.
Thank you
it's really appreciated
for your time and
Thank
welcome
you.
back for the nominations and for the awards.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Thanks very much. Very
Everyone.
insightful. Thanks for your time.
Thank you, everyone. Amazing work.
Bye.
The bathroom as well. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone. Jeremy is making very clear who he prefers.
You've got to support the strike.
You're having a sit-in, literally. Great.
Thanks for hosting this. I was afraid you guys would find out I wasn't British and I wouldn't be able to get into the Zoom. But it's so nice to be able to talk to editors, you know.
Absolutely. That's why we do it, and it's great too.
Right.
Yeah.
And so much of what you guys said, I have felt before and experienced before, and it's great to share experience with people who have been down in the trenches.
Mm.
Yeah, that's what we're trying to do. That feeling. Little group. We know what we're doing, what we go through.
I think that for editors who are starting out, they just can't believe that however experienced editors are, every new job is you approach with a sense of wonder, and that's the reason we keep doing it for so long, because it is new and unique and it's great.
Mm.
I also approach with a sense of fear most of the time though as well. But
fear and wonder.
Yeah.
That never goes away. Alan, ask your question. Come on, unmute yourself.
Okay. Sorry, this is just the only question that I wanted to ask. Davis, are you aware how important your film was? How extraordinarily important in this political circumstance that everybody needs to see this film? No pressure.
Yeah. Thank you for saying that. I think that, you know, the credit goes to Jeff for having this sort of foresight to see these, you know, this issue as it was emerging. When he first started talking to me about it, he told me, he's like, I know what we're going to do. I know what the next film's going to be. And it's a problem that's even bigger than climate change. And I was like, what are you talking about? There can't be a problem bigger than climate change. And then, you know, turns out there is a problem. It seems like is bigger than climate change, or at least a problem beneath the problem. So it was intimidating, you know, and stressful to work on this project, because, you know, the longer we worked on it, the more we realized what the stakes were, and it was very stressful. And I know that Tristan Harris was extremely stressed out about the film, even though he wasn't making it. He just knew he was in it. He felt like the future of humanity was riding on whether or not we messed it up. And I think he's happy with it. You know, and the other difficult thing was, it just felt like the whole time we were making it was such a moving target that, you know, the story and the issues were evolving so quickly. You know, we had a big sequence in the film about Cambridge Analytica that by the time we were done making it, everybody already knew about Cambridge Analytica. So it was difficult, but you know, I think that it's great to work on topical films and films that are seen by a lot of people. I certainly think more people saw this than any other film that I've worked on. And that's one of the great things about these streaming platforms like Netflix, that make films sort of instantly available to anyone. And one of the positive aspects of social media, that, you know, you can say something on your Facebook feed about this awesome movie that you just saw, and then, you know, a dozen other people will go see it. So we benefited a lot from the same system that we were critiquing, and
Yep.
That was interesting too, but I'll take what I can get, I suppose.
I think you'll find that Tristan was quite happy with the movie. I follow Sam Harris's podcast, Making Sense, and he was extremely happy with the way that the film worked out. So kudos to you.
Well, Tristan is a pretty extraordinary human. And he's sort of cut from the same cloth as our director, Jeff Orlowski. He's kind of one of these guys who'll have an idea and see that something needs to be fixed, and he'll, just like Greta, will just decide to do it.
Yeah.
And, you know, thank God for those people, you know.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
I was wondering if, for, I guess, everybody, all the other editors, did, like, for you, Davis, did Tristan and the other people, and obviously for you, Hanna and Charlotte, like, were any of the people in the film involved at all in the decision-making process, or were they able to give you any notes, or did they see the film throughout the process? And also with Dave, I'm sure David was involved as well.
Come on, guys, don't be shy.
Yes, in our case, I think Greta and her father saw the film like 3 times during the process, not too early, and they didn't have any comments about their private life. They had some environmental comments, some fact comments.
But that's also how it usually is, you know,
Yeah.
The things you're so afraid of that you think they will comment on, usually just slip away, and it's like something totally different you never thought that they would comment on. So yeah.
We had a very collaborative process with Tristan and the other people at his organization, the Center for Humane Technology, but they weren't involved with the edit at all, and there was a little headbutting between the filmmakers, between the director and I, and Tristan, as far as focusing on certain things, and you know, there were even conversations at Sundance about like what we needed to change about the movie, but that's I think to be expected when everybody involved is so passionate about it. There certainly were a lot of cooks in the kitchen though. It wasn't something one person could really understand completely. So we needed as much help as we could get.
I think in my case, it was a fairly hands-off process from the senior directors on the project. So I was working with Johnny Hughes in the edit, and he was with me, most days for at least part of the day. And it was a sort of creative collaboration between his head and my head, and occasionally Keith and Alistair would come in and have a look at what we were doing and give us a bit of guidance, but it wasn't heavy-handed guidance, and if it ever threatened to be, we'd sort of nip it in the bud quite quickly, really. But so no, it was a good relationship between all of us, but it was very much a sort of two people in a room sort of job, really.
And when did you show it to David?
David would have been I can't remember. I think he probably saw it. We spent 6 months working on it. That was the span of our editing time, and I think David would have seen an early cut after a couple of months, as far as I remember. And then he, probably at an interval of a few weeks at a time after that, just to see how it was all shaping up.
I have one more question for the other editors. If you guys.
I should hope so too.
So when you're going through the initial footage of everything, especially when there are two editors, how do you each go through it and pull your own selects? And just I guess just how do you organize, and do you watch everything through at once? Do you start cutting it as soon as you start watching stuff? Do you really process the footage before you even start editing and take notes?
For us working too, we didn't have the opportunity to watch it together.
No, and because it was so much material, we had an assistant who first cut down all the, because he was rolling all the time. And so just to cut down the first selection, we had an assistant who did that.
Mm. And then, but normally I watch everything and
exactly.
I do stars. And I'm very
with grade.
Yeah. So I'm grading with stars and writing comments. I had goosebumps on my arms. I have goosebumps on my legs. That's weird. Stuff like that I write and comments about everything. And then I watch it with the director the second time to kind of tune in both of us together. That's my process normally.
Yeah.
Anyone else?
How do you guys watch your Martin and Davis? Do you guys watch everything first, or especially I guess with all the archival footage are you constantly pulling that stuff, or do you have your assistants pulling that stuff? Are you always, especially with the David Attenborough, you have all of his previous films. Do you already have that on hand, or do you have to get that access throughout the process?
As far as I remember, most of it was already in the system. I think Johnny knew which bits he was likely to use. The David Attenborough films themselves, people were quite sort of across. They remembered certain sequences that they wanted to make use of. The David and the gorillas in Life on Earth is a classic. We knew we'd need that. A lot of the rest of the material came from an outfit called Papa Sierra. I don't know whether you've anybody's ever come across them. But it was just a really good source of sort of generic archive material, which we were using largely for its sort of metaphoric value, and the way that sort of fed into the narrative of the film. But we did have a picture researcher in the early days, and they would be pulling all that stuff into the system. By the time I came on stream, I think it was probably largely all in, although we did identify a few things that we knew would be really useful, so went back to get them again.
I think in a perfect world, I'd like to watch everything myself, but it's a lot of times I just don't have time to do that. We had, with The Social Dilemma, we had our sort of primary interviews. The first interview we did with Tristan was 3 days long, and so there were like 3 big, huge chunks, and Jeff and I, the director, and I just sat and watched the whole thing. And we were both there when the interview was shot too, so it was all review to a certain extent. And sometimes I'll have notes from when the interview happens that I'll know the areas I want to go back to. But like with this film, we didn't really know what our point was when we started, so we just started organizing it into topics, and we had 60 different sequences of like, this is about human evolution, this is about this is about that. And so there was a lot of that going on at first. But especially when there's a ton of footage and it's observational and it's 3 hours of somebody filling up water buckets somewhere, I'll rely on my assistant editors to go through that stuff and pull their selects and kind of make the biggest, fattest, best version of the scene that they can do first, and then I'll work from that version usually and go back to it. Archival films are fun too. We have this film that I'm working on now, we have hundreds of hours of archival stuff put together already, but I find that I'm just as likely to have a crazy idea in the middle of the cut and just go onto YouTube and try to find a microwave popcorn ad from the 80s and just rip it and put it in and like let somebody else figure out how to get permission to use it. So it's tough to watch everything, and that's one of the great things about having assistant editors on projects like this. With is that it's up to them really to be the first filter that everything goes through.
The question, Davis, where are you? Is that your house? That room you're in?
I'm in what used to be a commercial laundromat in Denver, Colorado. My friend and I bought it, and we were fixed it up to put our offices in. Yeah, this is
wow.
I thought it was Chernobyl, and you were doing this in respect deference to Martin.
Inspired by Chernobyl.
I thought you were so paranoid. You're doing this interview at an undisclosed location.
It's got a bit of a bunker vibe to it, yeah. But it's nice to work here in Denver. It's been challenging to attract exciting projects, and I think I spent a long time wondering why I hadn't moved to LA or New York, or wondering when I was going to have to move to one of those places. And I think I may have dodged that bullet. Not that I wouldn't want to live in LA, but I might be one of the few people in Denver doing this kind of thing.
But by the sounds of it, you have everything you need in Denver, as far as your work's concerned.
We do, and one of these things that happened with COVID is that everybody figured out we can work remotely. So, unfortunately, we might all be doing this in the future. I think it's important to get in the same room with the people you're working with sometimes.
I have one more question. With COVID and this new working from home, I guess it's even harder to take time off, because especially with all this footage you have to watch, and it's just endless amounts of footage and you could just be going all night. How do you guys handle like work-life balance while having like a complete mountain of like, what are your boundaries, I guess?
I will just say personally that that was a problem for me early on. I mean, when I first started getting into feature docs, I was at the office until way past dark all the time, and it wasn't healthy for me. And when I started a family, I finally had an excuse to leave the office, and that's what I sort of rely on now is, once it gets to be, dinner time, I need to get home and help with the kids. So it's important. You can't, I mean, there's a point of diminishing return, you can't stare at a computer for more than 8 hours and think you're going to do anything brilliant. That's what I've found over the years.
Yeah, off the back of that, I was wondering, like, because you mentioned about you struggled with it, when you were first starting out. Is it something that you think it is just something you have to do when you're starting out? Like, it's okay when you're starting out to do this sort of non-stop, like eat, sleep, and breathe it kind of thing? Or do you think it is good to practice that normal work-life balance early on?
I think for me, it's been kind of just because I do work in commercials. So I was, doing commercials by day, and then I was cutting trailers and side projects by night and developing different relationships. And so it's just dependent on, it's tricky. I think it was really hard. I was doing shorts. I was working on till like, day job, and then working on something till like 3 or 4 in the morning. It was not healthy. I think the younger you do it, the more stamina you have, but the older you get, the harder it is. And yeah, I don't know. I think, having a clear idea of what you want to do, and if you're able to make those connections earlier on, then, maybe it's a little bit easier. But because I was sort of trying to balance the line of 2 different paths, it was pretty challenging. And I definitely struggle now still with like leaving, but I do think it's important to have breaks, and you do have a better perspective when you have a little time. Even just taking a 20-minute walk after lunch is like, it's hard to do, but you have so many ideas when you're like in the shower or taking a walk, and just like letting your brain like work without necessarily thinking about it. It just sort of comes up with ideas in the background. And it's really integral to the process.
Yeah, I think you're totally right. And I think the reason kind of why I asked that is because it's kind of like, at this point, you're more than happy to work such long hours because you're passionate about it, obviously. But I think the thing that makes me question it is I've got so many people around me saying, you work so much, why are you working now, why stop work, like, because I live in a house share with other young people, so they're like, why are you still working, and it just makes you think, should I be still working? But yeah, no, thank you for your advice.
I think also, if you're passionate about it and it doesn't feel like work and you're excited about it, then that's also what should drive you too. I mean, like, if you feel like when you're excited about something genuinely and you want to do it, and it's like something that gives you motivation, you don't feel as tired, but you do need eye breaks just from, you don't want to, ruin your eyesight.
So is it just this industry that everybody wants to get into that means that everyone's got to work that much harder, and so many more hours to prove themselves. I mean, you know, Ricky Gervais does a 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. day when he's shooting his stuff, because he's aware that people have lives sort of beyond the filming schedule. So why are our filming schedules so ridiculous in terms of hours?
I believe it's because you're never satisfied, and you can always put an extra cut. You can always do something more. For me, that's yeah. So it's the kind of personality combined with you can always do something more.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think another. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
I just was going to ask, do you think it needs to change to make the industry more accessible? Mothers, for example, you know, have often struggle.
But I just want to follow like up. You're saying you can always do more. So when do you feel that you've done it? You finished the edit?
Never. When the time money is gone, and the deadline, and then a year after, when you watch it, it's like, it was pretty good. I did good. It's like, and then it's a premiere, and then it's got no, never.
But also, I think like the hard work, like when you were younger and you were like all
24/7.
Yeah, exactly. But it's also like a learning process. But it's really hard. But it's and that could also be, as you said, the other ones, that I mean, it could be dangerous because it's like your passion, and it's hard to set limits. And it's and still it's something that you really, really love. So you have to, you know, the big struggle is to balance it.
Yeah, yeah.
When the money comes in, or when it's bigger productions, which actually forces you to something. Yeah.
That's the cliche, isn't it? If you find something that you love doing, you'll never work a day in your life. And that's so true for the business that we're in, because I would imagine that most of us here now are here because we have a passion for the job. And I cannot imagine anybody doing our job waking up and saying, oh, well, I've got to do this now. You know, there's always that sense of, I'm going to touch people, I'm going to move people, I'm going to propel people into experiencing something different because of the work that I do. Oh, by the way, I'm the first frame editor. So if anyone's got any stories that they want to tell, please send them to me and I'll print them, guaranteed. But no, it's a passionate industry, and passion is what it, you know, what motivates it and what makes it all work. So thank you, everybody, for this evening. It was rather wonderful.
He is also a documentary editor.
That's nothing to be ashamed of.
John, I mean, please.
Come on, John. Come on, Mr. James Bond.
Yeah. Give me a drama and I'll do the drama. It's not a problem.
So you do drama. You do drama.
Well, indeed.
I meant that as a compliment.
Thank you, John. Thank you.
Nice about documentaries where you could be involved in a wildlife conversation.
No, Martin's remarks about wildlife are actually quite germane, because everybody thinks that it's the purest form of documentary, because you cannot possibly lie when you show an animal doing something. And well, I have a book that I can write about all that, which I'm not going to bore you all with now. But I shared a story with Andy, which I'll just share with you now. I said to my father once, you know, when the lion is stalking an antelope and you hear the lion going past the dry grass and the sound effects of the as it's going past the dry grass. And I said, that's a middle-aged man in a sound studio with a copy of The Guardian crunching up the paper. My father had no idea of what Foley was. And he said to me, that's a lie. And I said, yes, it is, but it's truthfully spirited. So how do we get away with truthfully spirited, which is in fact a lie? Well, your filmmakers, give us an idea of that.
It's a big subject, isn't it?
Oh, Martin, it's huge.
My first experience of doing Foley's, or being present when Foley's were being recorded, was a guy. We had a shot of a polar bear walking through snow, and you know when you walk on freshly fallen snow, you get a slightly crunchy, squeaky sound. They created that sound by getting one half of a pair of tights and filling the foot of this one half of a pair of tights with custard powder, and when you squeeze that, you get the squeak and the crunch. Lovely.
Marvelous, marvelous. And so many people react negatively when you tell them the truth. And it's like,
Yeah.
no, we all want to hear stories. That's the point of what we do. We're not going to lie. We're not going to actually say this didn't happen or whatever. But there's nothing stopping us from actually enhancing the reality of the natural history story.
No, exactly.
Because we're filmmakers. So,
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the minute I make a cut between two animals looking at each other, I remove those animals from their original reality.
Yeah.
And I create a new relationship between them.
Absolutely. Martin, islands are all we've got in natural history. You and I should have a proper conversation, because I've been doing this for 25 years or whatever, and it is fascinating how much wildlife can actually teach you about narrative filmmaking, and how things are incredibly primal when it comes to when you've got a duck that just turns its head this way, and then you cut to something that turns its head that way, how you can set up a relationship between the two. I'm not going to bore you all with that. I'm not,
I'd love to hear that conversation. I think that sounds like it's going to be a very interesting conversation. And I'm not joking.
Me too.
Martin, was that you who cut the famous iguana and snakes that's on the BBC clips of David Attenborough? Huh?
The what on the snake? Sorry.
We're talking about drama and wildlife. There's a clip on the BBC website called Iguana and the Snakes.
Iguana and the snakes. No, I know what you mean. No, that wasn't one of mine, I'm afraid. No.
I'm sure you've done loads of things like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. They're kind of excellent examples. There's a moment where the snakes is chasing, sort of threatening this iguana and stuff, and the iguana gulps. It's excellent.
That's what we're doing. We're making drama out of things.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
I unfortunately have to pop off because I have a call, but it was such a pleasure to meet all of you and talk to you and learn from you. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Zoe.
Thank you, Zoe.
Thank
Appreciate
you.
it.
And we will also want to thank you.
Yeah.
And everything is such a great initiative, and and for a lovely conversation, for hosting it and everything.
Keep
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
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 Thank you so much.
Yes, I too am going to have to leave, I'm afraid. But thanks ever so much, everyone, for your input. That was really good. I enjoyed.
Thanks, Martin. Cheers. Thank you for coming.
Okay. No.
Thanks, Martin.
Cheers. Bye.
Thank you guys again as well, and sign off here.
Thanks.
Cheers. Thanks,
Bye,
David.
everyone.
Thanks very much.
Thanks, David.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Lovely time.